Good evening, everybody. I think it's 7:15, so I think we should start. Thank you all for coming to this meeting. I would like to start by welcoming everyone tonight, and would like to take some opportunity to remind everyone I expect you to treat all members of the committee with respect and to accord the same respect to officers and other people who have been invited to speak to the committee this evening. Members of the public who are observing the meeting should not interrupt in any way. And there's a filming notice. Please note that this meeting is being filmed for subsequent broadcast on the Council's website. Therefore, by entering the chamber and sitting anywhere except in the public gallery, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for broadcasting and/or training purposes. As your images cannot be removed post-recording, if you are a member of the public and do not wish to have your image captured, please speak to one of the council staff. Thanks. And also, we have the public toilets on the ground floor are currently closed for refurbishment. Therefore, public and disabled toilets are in the library. Please go through the cafe seating area to where a security guard will direct you should you need to go to the, you need to use the facilities. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? No. Declarations of pecuniary interest? None. Minutes of the previous meeting. Do members think it's a true and correct record of the previous meeting? Yeah. And now to agenda item number 4, which is on waste recycling and street cleaning. To the people who've asked to speak at today's meeting, just to let you know that we're operating, each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak to ensure fairness. We will be using the traffic light system. Once the timer starts, the light will be green. The light will turn amber when you have 1 minute left. And when the time is up, the light will turn red and you must end your speech immediately. So it would be good if you could keep to the time. I don't want to have to ask you to stop. Oh, thanks. Shall I call the public speakers to come? The first person here is Rudy Leone, a Mitcham resident. Do you want to go and speak? Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to a couple of subjects. First is transparency. In its reply to an FOI request, Mertens refused to publish Veolia performance and deduction information because to do so may apparently prejudice commercial interests and damage reputation and prejudice existing contracts or the ability to bid for future contracts. FOI exists to protect public funds, inform tax-paying residents as to the performance of their services and performance of the council's contract management. It's to inform other local authorities regarding the performance of contractors. Sutton formed residents and Veolia reduced their monthly invoice based on their assessment of deductions that apply. I fear that the art of trust is being pushed too far. The council confirmed to me in a complaint in relation to missed collection marked as complete that Veolia had inadvertently or on purpose marked the job I complained about as complete.
Good evening. I'm chair of the Apostles Residents Association in Rains Park. I've got some good news and bad news. The good news is that, yes, our streets are cleaner since the introduction of the wheelie bins. I was not somebody who supported it, I must admit, but the truth is they are cleaner. Not perfect, but what it said on the packet is happening. But the bad news is the end of the roads where we've got flats. in Kingston Road, and the rubbish there is an awful lot worse. And why is this? Well, it's because they haven't got wheelie bins, because there's nowhere for them to put it. And they are still putting out rubbish every week. And of course, if they put it out the wrong week, it waits. So my plea is, please do focus on that problem, because we've got some good news, which we're pleased about, but it is being undermined by the management of the flats. Thank you.
Oh dear. The whole system doesn't work. The green bags at Veolia Sweep Hub and then abandoned for days. Since October, when the road sweepers were halved, the staff follow a fortnightly route. So I know exactly where the bags will be left. Why doesn't the response vehicles know the exact same route that I know? We have problems where we make reports on the Merton Council website, which crashes constantly. I've had it once, crashed again today. And for some reason, Veolia claim they're not receiving those reports. So is that the reason why Veolia leave the borough in such a mess? I reported surgical needles thrown all over the floor in St Helier Avenue. 4 days later, nobody bothered to collect them. So I picked them up. I've got enough here for all the councillors in here to have one each, not addressed at all. Fly posters. These have got the same phone number on, and they have been here since Ross Garrard was here. He knows who prints these up. Chris Lee knows who prints these up. But these are on every single street corner, Central Road. Now, these are there. No one in Merton Council cares about the contract, and they laugh it off in council. Thank you.
Mike Nash.
Hi, good evening. I'm here representing the Cruiser Road Residents Association. I just want to talk about a couple of things, really. One is around the reduced strength weed killer, or none at all. I watched a chap come round. First time I've seen him, I've not seen him since, who attempted to spray, and he's obviously trying to save money because nothing was really coming out the gun. We've had to pay someone to come along in our cul-de-sac and cut and weed up the stuff around the circle and cut back overgrown weeds. In Friday Road and the roads appertaining around there, we've got metre-high weeds growing out from the pavement. It looks like one of those derelict houses that you see on Homes from the Hammer. It really brings the whole road down. And I'm wondering what's so difficult about. It used to happen. We used to have weed killers. They come around, they do it, and it disappears. Now it doesn't make any difference at all if they do it at all. We have the road sweeper chap walking across the end, looking down the road and keep going. Doesn't come down that cul-de-sac or the following one. I've filmed the cart that goes down with the spinning wheels, driving down so that he can satisfy the GPS, turning around the turning circle and driving straight back out again. I did send that clip to the local councillor. So we have all of these things cumulatively. It makes the area you live in less than desirable. And I'm sure that if someone came around with the intention of purchasing a house, I know I would, and I'd look and
Thank you. Leak.
Hi, I represent the Wimbledon Union of Residents Associations, which is 6,000 residents between Rains Park and the village. I have made 15 points in a report which I've circulated to the council officers, so I don't want to repeat all those now. I just want to highlight one or two. Firstly, we do think the waste collection system is improving, although there's still a long way to go, and we make some detailed points on that. One of the problems is that for larger households, the bins are overflowing, and that then effectively means that waste gets contaminated, or the foxes and the other birds pull it around, so we're not achieving much. Also, we do see operators pulling the waste sacks out of the grey bins and throwing them into the lorry because they find it difficult to use the wheelie bin, and I think this is something Veolia needs to look at in terms of operations. So whilst waste is getting better, streets are bad. Your own reports admit it. It needs a complete rethink, and I think it needs more humans with brooms rather than vehicles which can't get down half the roads. One thing you might consider is what other councils do, is having every 6 months no parking on one side of a road so the vehicles can actually get down. And lastly, drains are largely blocked, and I want to talk about that. I do mention it here. And communications. We desperately need to improve the online reporting system. You've been talking about it for 18 months. We're very happy to sit with somebody from the council, a council officer, and work out how best to improve that. But if you could improve that, it would cut out a lot of the phone calls which people get fed up with being told they're 15th in line anyway. So please, let's improve communications, and then I think we can help you together achieve better performance from Veolia and from Merton.
And Michael Marks from Rains Park and West Barnes.
Veolia crews need to comply with the service contract. They must remove all the contents of each bin, not leaving some behind, then return emptied bins to the premises from where they came. Even with house numbers on, this doesn't happen. Toilet breaks for the staff are not adequate. The alley between Fairway and Bushy Road is Friday's stopping point for crews to relieve themselves. This was reported to the council, but they were not interested, and the resident was told to call Veolia, who are even less interested. Street waste bins at the end of Beverley Avenue and the one on the 163 bus stop, Blenheim Road, are left full for too long. Consequently, they are overflowing, with the contents being strewn across the road. Plastic bags of rubbish are left alongside them. The recycling boxes are now too small and need a lid. The wind blows the plastic out of the overfull boxes. Council have told residents who request a third box that they will send one out, but none have ever arrived. Why do the council charge for recycling? Scrap the garden waste charge. More people would take a brown wheelie bin, greatly reducing landfill. There was talk of larger wheelie bins compatible with the collection trucks. Is this going to happen? Perhaps an annual fee for the larger bin may encourage families to recycle more rather than requesting a larger bin. The quality of the blue lid for the cardboard and paper bin is thinner and less robust than the grey. There are approximately 10% already damaged, usually the front corners of the lid, and there have also been complaints of them warping, causing rainwater to puddle on the top and pouring into the bin when opened. The cost for replacement of faulty lids should be down to the manufacturer, as the product supplied is not fit for purpose. Left as they are, in a year or two, these paper bins will be full of rainwater through the broken lids, so defeating the object of having them. Also, the blue bin is either too large or it does not need collecting fortnightly.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Can I ask you to stop? Tom Walsh.
Tom Walsh from Merton's environmental charity, Sustainable Merton. 4 points to make. First, we are looking forward to working with Merton's street champions to improve the reporting of fly tipping and other problems on streets across the borough. We employ 50 community champions, so we hope that that will add to the reporting rate that you get to deal with. Last year we ran a plastic-free Merton campaign, which ran for 6 months and resulted in a lot of companies changing their policies on single-use plastic, pubs banning straws and so on and so forth. We think that heading towards a zero waste society is the aim of every council, should be the aim of every council. So we obviously support Merton any way we can in that. 2 ways that Merton can play their part. Many residents have told us that they're tired of dealing with rubbish that can't be recycled, and they wonder why companies are allowed to produce this stuff in the first place. So we would ask Merton Council to double their efforts in lobbying government to make sure this practice comes to an end. And lastly, I've forgotten what my last point is now. I'm really sorry. That's it. I've covered everything now. Oh no, sorry. Public events. Could you make it a condition of giving somebody a license to hold a public event that they don't use any single-use plastic at their events? Thank you.
Mari Davidson, Battles Area Residents Association.
Sorry. Last February, I spoke at the State of Our Streets at the Scrutiny panel meeting with Veolia reps present. The new wheelie bin system started in October. Millions of pounds of our money spent to implement, yet no improvement to the amount of litter and fly tipping on our streets. There are numerous issues. Fly tip hotspots. More enforcement is needed. Many wheelie bins are pointless as operatives remove sacks by hand. Recycling boxes need lids to prevent items being scattered in wind and soaked in rain. Recently, leaves have been cleared from gutters, some more effectively than others, but not from pavements. Leaves turn to mulch, blocking gutters and drains and are a slip hazard. We need to return to weekly street cleaning. Properties unable to accommodate wheelie bins still haven't received coloured sacks. Black sacks are not removed by Veolia. Confusion over collection days. There are still some signs in streets displaying pre-wheelie bin collection days. Street bins not emptied frequently enough. Green sacks left by street cleaners not collected promptly, encouraging fly tipping. Wheelie bins left on the street before and after collection, some permanently. I spend a huge amount of time walking locally, photographing and reporting the many problems in Merton High Street, Abbey Parade and side roads. The system shouldn't rely on reports by residents and councillors. With no apparent facilities for presenting their waste, some flats above shops and businesses themselves daily leave waste on Merton High Street, ignoring the nearby signs showing the specific days and times they should present their waste. They now also dump waste at the end of the side roads leading to the High Street. Enforcement action with householders and landlords is needed now. It seems the only time action is taken to resolve an issue is when a resident or councillor speaks directly to a Veolia manager. Our Merton Council's own procedures, the blockage in the system. Frequently, the same problem has to be reported numerous times. Do Veolia ever receive these reports? They certainly don't appear to have access to location details with Merton's SRQ numbers. Reporting on SRQ resolution is inadequate. SRQs are reported as resolved when no action has been taken.
Elizabeth Gieke. Is she here? No. Roger Norman. No. Dan Good.
In 2010, Merton was voted the dirtiest borough. Against a backdrop of council indifference, residents began to fight. It was an uphill battle, but with persistence, standards did start to improve. No one envisaged within weeks of Veolia assuming the contract, we would be thrust back to 2010. When outsourcing of waste was mooted, residents said the plans didn't add up. The in-house service had struggled for years, and yet council leaders promised a like-for-like service, even though it was clear the contractor would have to further streamline waste management to extract a profit. Under Veolia, we've endured overflowing bins, missed collections, a shocking fall in street cleanliness, hardly the like-for-like service promised. Filth on our streets has increased. Litter and fly tipping have skyrocketed. Myriad photographs attest to this. Keep Britain Tidy stresses that a littered environment encourages more littering. Having reduced street cleaning, Veolia has actively created a filthier Merton. Assurances from councillors Brunt and Alan Brittis of Veolia being fined at the end of last year proved, after an FOI request, to be false. Our leaders show themselves inadequate in this failing contract. The improvement in the service, much vaunted recently, has in no way addressed the previous months of uncollected waste now trapped under hedges, in drains and shrub beds. This backslapping insults the many residents who endlessly report dirty streets, uncollected bins, and who pick the litter. Roads like Mordenhall Road, Hayden's Road and St Helier Avenue remain filthy week after week after week, despite constant pleas from residents. With tacit support from council leaders, Veolia has introduced by stealth a lowering of standards to preserve its profits. This service serves the provider, not the client. Veolia hoped we wouldn't notice the disappearing bins, the slow build-up of rubbish. They are mistaken. Residents will fight the drop in standards until we get the service we are paying for and the service we were promised.
Can you stop? Your time's up. Thank you very much. Is it Scott Edgell from Veolia? Will you be able to respond to the speakers, please?
There was lots of points put across, so I'll probably not be able to cover all of the points back, but I'm not going to cover the point on performance deductions. I think that's been covered previously. The point on the apostles, the question on the apostles, I do actually agree. I walked through the apostles on my checks and I do agree that there is an issue at the end of the apostles on the headers that needs to be addressed. And the gentleman that was quite rightly put it, that it's down to flats presenting bags. That is not an uncommon problem that we've got across Merton that we need to address. So there's need to be more work, joint work with Veolia and the local authority to deal with flats presenting bags at the wrong time. Some of the points just made around some of the streets, St Helier Avenue, Merton High Street, Hayden's Road, they're all issues where people are presenting waste at the wrong time and not following the time set out in our schedules. Some of the questions on we've received from the Wimbledon Association about the yellow transfer bins. Currently we're continuing to use the yellow transfer bins on the refuse collection service. We don't want to, but currently we're dealing with so much side waste as people adjust to the new service. We're currently allowing it with the staff. It is a plan to reduce that and eventually completely remove all the yellow bins. We'll still use the transfer bins on the box collection day, so the container mix, but the plan is to completely take it out of the refuse. There should be no reason why the crews walk down the street and don't take the wheelie bin to the back of the vehicle. That is an instruction we've given, that is something we're training out. We made it very clear at the reinduction process that that's what's expected. But at the moment we're allowing them to use the yellow containers for side waste that's currently being presented, which we're clearing, otherwise we have an issue with more of a street litter issue. I will address the point about the Veolia crews using Bushy Road as a toilet. That is completely unacceptable, particularly as Garth Road is probably only about a 5-minute drive, our depot from Bushy Road. I do come in via Bushy Road every day, so I will make sure that that's dealt with. The blue lids, if I could, I have seen some examples of broken blue lids. We will change any lids that are broken. That is the industry standard, unfortunately, we're purchasing right now for the blue lid on the paper bin. Some did arrive very quickly. We ordered a significant amount of plastic at one point, and if there's any that are faulty, we'll happily exchange them, and people can fill that in online, and we will come and change those bins over. The battles, I'm just sorry, go for the other point. I think that's probably the points I wanted to cover. Thank you. I've actually spoken to Mr. Nash previously before this meeting, and we'll be going out to inspect the roads. We've actually increased in our contract. We offered to provide 2 spraying. We've actually increased that to 3 because I didn't think it was appropriate. I didn't think it was working well enough. I've currently got that whole service under review. I do think that the chemicals that are being used these days aren't as effective as they could be, so we need to look at some other opportunities and some other ways to deal with weeding in the borough. And certainly it isn't acceptable that a sweeper looks into a cul-de-sac and doesn't actually go in because he doesn't think he needs to deal with the work, so that will be addressed as well.
Now we'll go to the main report. Just before we start the scrutiny, I open it out to the panel. I just wanted to say that scrutiny of Veolia's contract is being carried out of the Financial Monitoring Task group has agreed at the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. Therefore, questions today will be focusing on the delivery and implementation of the rollout of the new scheme since it was introduced in October, Veolia's performance, where it is working and where it is not. Veolia have kindly agreed to attend to address these issues and update us on how they're doing and addressing to improve their performance. And I think Chris will introduce. Oh, you wanted to say, sorry. Mike Brunt, cabinet member, will say.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And I welcome the opportunity to bring this report, for Office to bring this report to Overview and to the Scrutiny panel tonight. Closer, is that better? Right, thank you. This is an area that I've had involvement in for many years as someone here, and I've bored people in the past about the connection I've had with refuse collection, street sweeping, being the member responsible back in the 90s on this. So I do refer to myself often as the recycle councillor, not as I've been called, and I accept sometimes the rubbish councillor. The last time we were here, it was just on the point of rollout of the new service. And obviously, there were high hopes of a smooth transition to what is a significantly different operation to the one before. Maybe it was a tall order that hoped it would be smooth, but we mustn't forget that 68,000 households, broadly speaking, have got a new refuse service compared with the one they used to have, and 3/4 of those have got a different day of collection. So it was no small change of service. And I don't deny that there were some significant issues and concerns early on, which we moved quickly with Veolia in partnership to address. Largely, that was driven by a shortfall of delivery of containers, of wheelie bins, with a roughly 10% not being delivered on time. That inevitably had an impact because we were catching up from the day one, which was not the position any of us wanted to be in. And that had an impact, therefore, on the delivery of the increased number of recycled boxes that were needed for plastic, glass, cans and cartons, and also in the increased take-up of food waste and the recycling there of food carriers. So we should have been delivering and meeting that need from the first day. We weren't. We were trying to catch up on delivery of wheelie bins. It's also had an impact on the delivery of larger wheelie bins for those that are trading up, for those that need to have larger bins for whatever reason, as in my family's case, and I hold my mum up often as an example of someone, as a benchmark of what public opinion is. She was entirely against wheelie bins until my dad needed incontinence pads, and now it's been a saviour for them. And that's why some people need larger bins, nappies or the like, and also larger households. But we failed in delivering those on time for many people because of the catch-up situation. So in some ways, we were a victim of our own success with that take-up of food waste increase and the backlog there. But looking back, what have been the highlights of the last 6 or 5 months for me as the responsible member? Well, each month, over 500,000 containers are emptied from people's households. And we mustn't forget that. That's a tool. So we're heading towards 6 to 7 million empty containers a year, which is a lot of containers. A 58% increase in food waste recycling, which is about 150 plus tonnes, 157 tonnes, I'm told, in fact, per month. So that is about 16 refuse trucks full of food waste every month that wasn't going into the food waste recycling chain before. A 20% increase in garden waste, up from 7,500 to almost 9,000. We're hoping to grow that even more. And that's equated over a 3-month period, you'll see in the report, to over 500 tonnes of garden waste extra compared with the same period the previous year. That's 50 refuse trucks full of garden waste. 45% is our target for recycling, and that is within grasp. I'm hopeful that we will exceed that. Sutton certainly exceeded it in its first year, and I'm hopeful we'll do that. This compares, I don't often use the Wandsworth comparison, but Wandsworth has a target of 22.3%, I believe, for their recycling, and they're not even achieving that. So The number of people receiving assisted collections is a huge increase there. We've gone almost doubled on that. And that's a credit to us as a borough that we've been responding to residents who sadly perhaps weren't aware of the service before, but this service change has meant that we've publicised it and we're out there and we're serving an extra 460 people roughly, or households with assisted collection. A reduction overall in the number of tonnes of going to landfill every month, 330 tonnes going to landfill. And don't forget that includes the litter bins, and it includes the what's swept from the streets, and includes the fly tips, but a 330 tonne reduction overall. 33 refuse trucks equivalent, roughly. Fly tips reported and cleared within 24 hours, and I'll go on to talk a bit about the reporting system, but nevertheless, we've got at a rate of nearly 90% cleared within 24 hours if they're reported on the system and acknowledged that way. So for me, as the Cabinet member, what do I see as the challenges going forward? And I think it's useful to mention those, because there are things that occupy a lot of my time and my concerns. I think we need to close the loop on container delivery. We need to draw a line there. We need to get that right. We're almost there on it, but we need to make sure that everyone has the appropriate bins for the service they need. And I think that we're close to it, but we just need to finish that off. Dealing with the unprecedented growth in fly tipping. If you don't need to just drive around Merton, but if you go around and travel around different parts of the country, there seems to be an epidemic of fly tipping. And we're not alone in dealing with that. And if we don't step up our game on that, we're going to get the fly tipping from other boroughs coming into us. So we need to make sure that we're ahead of the game on that. We are successfully prosecuting. Only recently, we've seized vehicles and crushed vehicles where the owners did not come in to have conversations with us. And these were vehicles that we've caught on CCTV, fly tipping within the borough. And we're not going to stop with that. I don't expect everyone to do it, but I do go through bags looking for addresses. I wouldn't recommend it because it's not a pleasant job, but I have given witness statements and I'm prepared to go forward with that. I wouldn't ask residents to do that, but we actually have a small team of officers who do that. And it's a thankless task for many to have to go out and do that. But they do it on our behalf, and they do it to their credit. Linked to the fly tipping epidemic that seems to be going on and the way we try to deal with that, there's also street sweeping and cleanliness. And I hear the points that have been made tonight, because I think we need to make sure that all our streets are as good as the best in the borough. And we need to work hard to make that happen. We're taking on 3 additional street inspectors to supplement the client management team, so they'll be out there on the streets monitoring more. Flats above shops, and again that's been mentioned by residents today. I think that this is a challenge for us, because it's twice a week, the collection, generally Mondays and Thursdays, Monday morning, Thursday afternoon, but it's becoming a regular custom and practice for many people living in flats above shops, particularly on busy highways, to be leaving their bags and the litter around litter bins, bus stops, trees, lampposts and the like. We've got to tackle that. We've got to find a solution. And that's not just to say that that the residents are completely wrong, because some of them think they're doing the right thing by putting it at a collection point to make sure that it's collected. So we need to work on an education programme there and potentially review that service to make sure that, particularly on the busy highways with narrow pavements, that is not something that people have to walk through on their way to school or on their way to the transport hubs. I think that also I would say that we've got an issue with blocks of flats where there are flats less than 10. What's clear from this change of service is that there were some people receiving a mixed service before. Maybe some of their collection was part of a flat collection service, some of it was part of a domestic waste collection service. And I think that, as Mr. Lartman said, at the end of the Apostles' Road, there's other sites like that around the borough. So I think we need to constantly review and work on the small blocks of flats. Are they getting the service? Has it transitioned to the new service? Because we must remember that any blocks over 10 didn't change through this. They're receiving the same service now as they did before. So I think that has highlighted that, and we need to work on that with Veolia and try and iron that out. I believe that we have an IT system that tries to do its best, and in many respects is doing its best behind the scenes and successfully doing that, communicating with Veolia and their ecosystem on board. But it's a one-way street from the residents' point of view. They report something, they don't get the feedback. They don't get anything back. And I'm pressing, and we're working with our IT team to make sure that we have a better IT reporting system. One that actually gives residents more confidence that they hear back, they reported something and it was cleared, or at least an email acknowledging that it was received. So I'm conscious of that, and I think we need to work on that. I think I would like another challenge for us is to expand the number of street champions we have across the borough, because they're a great asset. Residents care about the borough as much as we're all residents here. So we need to make sure that those who want to be involved can be involved, and they're given training and they're able to do that. And I think that we need to try tackling at source some of that, the stuff that ends up blowing around the streets. Particularly the lightweight plastic that blows out of the boxes, and I take the point about lids of boxes because they are elusive and we are still trying to work on that. But you know, I think that I welcome the government's initiative on a deposit scheme. We have been lobbying. I never thought I would ever write to Michael Gove, but I did write to Michael Gove before Christmas, congratulating him on his announcements of what he intended to do, making food waste recycling compulsory every week, and also on the introduction or the consultation on deposit scheme. And I welcome that, and I think that will tackle a lot of our issues as well. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that it's not all been a good picture, but I think that we have made great steps forward since the rollout last October. It is improving. There are streets, and I get residents saying that they're happy with what they're getting, but equally I do get some that are saying they're not happy, and we've had some tone of that tonight. But we have to remember as well that we have a small team of officers, and I do want to thank all those involved, from those that are employed to do the sort of work that we maybe we aspire to do. How many of us walk past someone who's dropped some litter in the street and say when we get home, I wish I'd said something to that person, or maybe have picked it up? But we actually have staff who go out there who do that, who knock on doors saying, there are bags outside your house, why are they there? Or we found a bag down the road with your address in, why is it there? So I do think we need to acknowledge the hard work of the staff we have here. So I know I rambled on a bit. Hopefully it wasn't a ramble, but it's something I think you'll see I'm passionate about, and I welcome this report, and I'm pleased to introduce it, and I'd like to give the Director an opportunity to add his points.
Chris, would you like to have a...
So I'll just add a little to what the Cabinet members said, and maybe pick up on some of the points raised by the public that haven't been addressed yet. I suppose I'll preface this by saying I don't think anybody on Veolia side or our side would accept that the service at the moment is where we want it to be. But that's not without trying, and I know that Veolia worked tirelessly and the staff in the department worked tirelessly to get to that point, and the direction of travel is in the right way. And it was encouraging to hear one or two voices this evening from residents acknowledging that that's the case. But that doesn't dim our efforts to make sure that we accelerate the improvement and we get there, particularly around streets below grade. Because I think we're getting there with the containerisation and the bins being emptied and the response around fly tips, but there's still a huge body of work. And I'll talk about some of the things that are happening in order to address that. But just in the order that some of the questions that haven't been answered this evening came up. Firstly, there was a point right at the start around transparency and performance and deductions, which I wanted to pick up on because it came up last evening. And we are, just to be absolutely clear, we're in exactly the same place as Sutton, and I know that Sutton were mentioned. Sutton have given a commitment to publish their performance data through the SLWP. We are doing exactly the same, and indeed tomorrow we're meeting with all 4 boroughs in order to look at the performance data that we expect, the common set of performance data that we expect to publish. We already publish a limited set of performance data in Merton, that's on the website every month, but we are moving swiftly towards being able to publish against all of the SPIs and some more detailed data around things like refresh performance, where something isn't completed and the refresh deduction continues. And what I'm not able to publish, and I've been absolutely clear on this for some time, is to publish financial deductions where they are unresolved, because that is commercially sensitive, because it's just speculation. Until the financial deduction is agreed and finalised and resolved and it's definite, it can't be published. It would be irresponsible, and we've had clear legal advice on that. And I have said that I will publish a public, in the scrutiny papers once we get to that point of having that final position. And that's never changed. And we'll get to that point and we'll publish and we'll have that discussion in the open. One or two other points that came up. Online reporting, the Cabinet member's been absolutely clear. We're not satisfied with the position around online reporting. We have had, the Council has had a problem with the contractor that we had provide the CRM system. That situation is now resolved. That contractor has now left the Council's contractual arrangements and we're in a different position. So we should be able to accelerate that functionality improvement. It's not where we want it to be. It is clunky, to use that old word, and we expect it to improve over the next few months. I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that we've gone through in October the biggest change in waste collection and storage that the borough's ever seen. And that is still settling down. And it only needs one household per street not to dispose of their waste in the proper fashion for that to end up all over the road. Because a sack of waste goes a long way. And we still have the situation where either through misunderstanding or through choice, some residents do not follow the method for storing waste or the amount of waste, and the side waste volume that's being created is significant. We are finalising plans, working very closely with Veolia to increase our education and enforcement capacity for probably around 6 months, to focus our attention on those households that need support, need advice, need help in getting the best out of the methodology we've got, which works everywhere across the country and will work in Merton. It's already working in many parts of the borough, as we've heard this evening, but until we get to a sort of 99% compliance rate, we will still have some of the problems we've got. So that investment in that extra capacity will really help us to get to that position. And we'll have those details. Now we've got much more intelligence from Veolia about which properties they've tagged for either contamination of waste or presentation of side waste. We're getting that data, we've got it geographically mapped, we've got the addresses, and we'll be focusing our attention on those households. Just on one other slightly more, well, a more minor point around some of the, I see them every day, these awful fly tip or scrap car posters that are on lampposts, not just in Merton, everywhere in London, and out into Surrey and Sussex when I've been out there. And it might seem simple to track down the perpetrators of this, but I can tell you it's not. And our enforcement team, these people are incredibly elusive. They only have a mobile number on there. Actually tracking down and bringing to law the perpetrators of this is so far proved to be beyond the capacity of other London Borough directors. But we're working together to look at how we can bring this to law. I've written them down when I'm on my bike and stick them in my back pocket. I'd encourage everybody else to do the same, because whilst Veolia will do them, we'll remove them. And you see evidence of some of the black tags, that are the strap to the ties that have been left up, unfortunately. But they're removed as quickly as we can get to them. And we should get rid of them as soon as we can, but also we'll try and bring to justice those perpetrators. And there was also mentioned, just to allay another fear, that there are disappearing bins. We're not removing bins from the streets. We might be replacing some, but we've not reduced the quantity of bins that we have out on the streets. So we are looking at some time in the near future to look at the location of bins, the supply of bins, and whether we've got the right type of bins, but we've not entered into that exercise yet. And I'm sure Scrutiny will be very interested in that work when we undertake it. Happy to answer any further questions, Chair.
Scott. questions on that? Is anybody? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to open up with, actually, we're going to try and get quite in depth tonight into the training, because it clearly suggests, Mr. Edgell, from what you told me, I'm sure I'm not the only one in the chamber that's quite surprised that it takes you to walk down a street to find rubbish outside of flats in the Apostles when your frontline staff have been going down and cleaning all the other streets. So we would like to know, or perhaps you could deliver and let us understand how the management is training the frontline staff, and also what feedback and how that has been fed back into the management from the frontline staff. The example I just spoke about is a clear example that that information about flats that are not being cleared is not getting back to you, unless, of course, you walk down every single street and it's down to you to find out where it's not being collected.
Thank you for the question. Training is something absolutely very important to Veolia. We do focus quite a lot of our training on health and safety, but we did actually at the beginning of the contract back in April 2017, we fully inducted everyone into Veolia and gave them a whole suite of training based on safety around manual handling, reversing assistance, then the role and the expectations of their work and what we expect to see, how they're expected to behave, how they're expected to interact with the local community, residents, businesses, etc. They've also given some training and induction on the new vehicles that we've purchased, and then there's a whole plethora around Veolia as an organisation. The training was actually completely everyone was re-inducted back into the service when we started the new collection service, and we made it very clear what our expectations were. As far as the feedback we receive, Echo is our main tool. So Echo is our system that works in all of our vehicles. We have a Samsung tablet which runs a database effectively. We receive our works orders, jobs, complaints, miscollections. All of it comes through Echo. The staff have to actually close those jobs, and they have to swipe very simply. It's designed in a very simple way that you swipe left or you swipe right, and there's a few drop-down boxes where you can pick, for example, that someone's presented excess waste, that someone's presented the wrong material in their paper bin, which is it's been quite common. It's also and we also, if someone hasn't presented their bin. Now you think, well, actually, who wouldn't present their bin? Well, there's quite a lot of people that actually don't present their bin for collection, and they come running down the road afterwards, and the staff are told to try and accommodate people if we can. But we also lock that, if someone doesn't present their bin, we also note that on our systems. So the frontline staff, particularly on collections, are able to give us a lot of feedback. The staff in the street service, only the vehicles, the cage vehicles, our mobile response vehicles, have the same technology. We don't give that technology to the manual barrow sweepers. So it isn't just me. I do like to walk lots of streets. I do think that data's one thing, but actually walking the streets is very important. I spent 4 hours out today because that's how we understand how an area works. So that is important, but it is made up of part of really Echo is our main thing. And our managers are there every day. We've got 2 environmental managers that work on the street service. One originally Troopy transferred from Merton Council, and one we've brought in from another contract. And the 2 environmental managers who spend their day, they have their work. The whole point is that they're completely mobile with their devices. They don't have to sit into the office, and they can go and check on the standards of work. So we've got quite a robust training plan, and we've got lots of feedback coming backwards and forwards from the staff.
It doesn't seem that robust, because clearly things are not happening on that front. What action have you taken to the clean street or the street cleaning crew that have clearly been missing the collection of the rubbish in the Apostles? It's clearly been happening for some time. You've walked down and discovered it. What action have you taken? We have a number of staff that are on performance improvement plans.
that's actually the resident who's not actually presenting the waste on the correct day. So what action would it be against the member of staff when it wasn't it was their job to go fortnightly and it wasn't actually their job to go? So we can't actually discipline someone for doing their job correctly, but we have got a number of staff that are being dealt with via performance improvement plans, where they've been given tasks, set very clear standards. There's a number of cage crews that have been given some very clear standards on frequency of emptying litter bins, and also the way they're dealing with ensuring that green bags are collected as frequently as required. That has been something we've been addressing.
So the answer is not very much.
No, it's not correct. The answer is there's been lots of performance improvement, and you can see that in the streets.
Okay, Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions. First, we're sort of while we concentrate on processes, are Veolia staff incentivised to report other problems that they spot whilst they're out on their jobs? So, for example, street cleaners possibly spotting fly tips. And secondly, you mentioned the environmental managers. I wondered if you could outline for us the way that they operate or work with Merton's neighbourhood client officers. My own experience, and I suspect my colleagues, is that our NCOs are unfailingly helpful, but they can't always make, it seems, Veolia do their job. The Apostles has been mentioned several times. That's actually in my ward, as it happens, and I know that we're working with Merton's officers to review the processes and look at some of the problems and give out some information. But actually, the example I wanted to give was the 37 emails that I had to exchange with Merton to get some bins delivered to a small set of houses. And every time I was told it had been escalated, and yet nothing happened. However, at such point that I broke and went higher within Merton, things got resolved very quickly. Now, that doesn't seem to me that the contract is being appropriately dealt with, and I just wondered from Veolia's perspective, how does that relationship work?
I think the relationship between the NCO officers and the two environmental managers and the contract manager, we've got for collections, for example, has been working quite well. I think they raised a number of points. We try to deal and work with them as quickly and as we can. There are some things we can't do. As far as bin delivery, the bin delivery was a huge undertaking. We actually employed a separate contractor, a company called Jet, who came in and undertook it on our behalf. But as the point was raised earlier, there was actually 27,000 other pieces of container outside of the main rollout that were requested. Boxes, food caddies. It's really quite a phenomenal amount of work that we've had to undertake. We've used some of our own crews. We've also mainly used a private contractor. So that's a slightly different point, and that I acknowledge there was some issues in communication. But I mean, my colleague Charles Baker is next to me from Merton. He runs that team. I think we have a good relationship. I think ideas are shared. Certainly through the rollout, we had a daily AM call and a debrief at the end of each day. So there's communication. They're talking to each other constantly. And I think they've built up quite a successful relationship over the last 22 months.
And on the incentivisation of staff?
We don't offer incentivisation to staff. There isn't, for frontline staff, there isn't an incentivisation programme. We do expect people. We pay the London Living Wage, which is a good rate of pay. We also pay good rates of pay for our HGV drivers. It's a very competitive market. We don't offer incentives to do your job correctly. Everyone's expected to follow procedure. The cage crews are expected to pull up information about fly tipping and actually present information back. That's happened a number of times when our staff have come back and said, this bag is presented every day and it comes from this household. Can you please pass that to enforcement, which we've done. And the local mobile response teams are tasked with dealing with their sweepers or speaking to their sweepers every day to try and find out where there is issues. So they're all tasked with working together. It's a team ethic. It has taken some time. There has been some people that have left our organisation because they can't quite follow the team ethic. But there's been new fresh people that have been brought in that understand the culture that we're trying to achieve at Veolia in Merton.
Councillor Macon.
I've got a couple of questions about training and so on. One of the things that's happening is the staff are not the same every week that's arriving in the wards. So my ward will get the same refuse team for a number of weeks, and then they'll get different ones. When the different ones arrive, they seem to have different rules. Like, for example, curtilage is one of them. I've had arguments with Veolia and the staff saying about picking up bins that are left outside people's properties or inside people's properties. They don't seem to know the difference between the two. I admit the street cleaning after the bin collection is a lot cleaner than it used to be, but it's still not perfect. It needs looking into.
We would like to have the same crew doing the same collection every fortnight on refuse. That would be an ideal world. Unfortunately for me, they are given holiday, and they are given training days, and they are given lots of. So there is always going to be an example, but the driver and the main part of the crew should be the same. That will be something I'll look into. We always try and give a consistent crew. We don't want crews made up completely of agency staff. We have, during every bank holiday, during every half term, and at Christmas, there is lots of people obviously asking for time off to be with their children, etc. So we have to balance that need, but we're providing consistent crews. The presentation policy should be quite clear. We will collect waste from inside of the property, but we would like it at the curtilage. We'd like it within arm's reach of the curtilage from. So there are a lot of people that are presenting their bins to outside the property. We're returning those to where we're finding them. I would encourage as many as the councillors in the room, if you encourage as many residents as you've got, that if they could number their bins, it does make our job easier to return them to the correct addresses. I know it seems a very simple thing to put a bin back to the same place you found it. I can assure you, as I spent my early days at university doing this job and loading containers, I can tell you it's not when you're dealing with 1,400, 1,500 containers in one day and you're trying to make a speedy service. So the more people that can number them, but we will collect containers from inside. If you find any examples of people not, please feel free to let me know directly. I think that was it. Oh, and just on the street cleansing or the street cleansing point, I do think the containers. I think what the containers have done have shown us where the issues need to be addressed, where people are overproducing, they're not recycling. I think certainly I can see from the areas that I travel that there is an improvement after collection day. Some of the worst streets that I found, the highest number of complaints. I do regularly visit particular points so I can see an improvement over time, and I have seen an improvement over time. I'm not saying it's on every street, but we are looking at our street cleansing resources. We've already deployed additional resources to deal with the influx of fly tipping, but there is still more work to be done to tidy up the schedules and make sure that we've got all sweepers working to the standards we expect.
Okay, Councillor Holden, yeah.
Thank you. First question is, will you actually apologise for the shambolic rollout of the bin collections and apologise in public to everybody here? We had an extraordinary meeting of the council, which is the first in 17 years, and I think so far I've not heard the word sorry. So that's question one. My second question is about fly tipping to query, this is for the cabinet member. You said we're almost at 90%. Isn't 90% the actual target? Wasn't the actual figure for January 12% for fly tips cleared within 24 hours? And isn't the overall for the year to date 47%?
Just to clarify the point on the bin rollout, I wouldn't call it shambolic, but I would apologise to any resident of Merton that didn't receive their container on time. We were undertaking a huge task. We did subcontract, and we probably didn't do enough to manage expectations on time. We asked originally for a 12-week programme. The programme was then, because of the time, and we always want to roll bins out and start a service at a particular point in the year. You don't want to do it when there's too many bank holidays, for example. So we were trying to meet a particular point. That meant we then squeezed our deliveries. Our subcontractors said they could meet those timelines. We used all of our influence to ensure they did meet those timelines, and they still left us short. We did have, although it's 10% is the quoted figure, The majority of the curbside containers, not the houses of multiple occupancy, had already received their containers. On top of that, the success of the recycling service then stripped any ability we had to have any additional capacity from Veolia, and I did bring in resources from outside. Many weekends the United Cllrs of Veolia turned up to try and but I would happily say to any resident that didn't receive their container on time that I personally apologise on behalf of Veolia.
Question on fly tip performance, if that's okay. And there's a discrepancy in the figures that are published in the scrutiny papers this evening because they don't reflect the actual performance. The problem is, and it should carry a health warning on there, for which I apologise, but a large number of the Veolia vehicles that are collecting the fly tips don't have the onboard tablets allowing them to immediately swipe it off as being collected. When we take that into account, the actual figure is closer to the 90%, I think 89%, as reported in the Cabinet, in the scrutiny report tonight, but the performance indicators pick up on the data from ECHO and CRM, which is under-reporting the actual performance. So we're in the process of resolving that, and it really relies upon all of the vehicles that Veolia have having the in-cab technology and being swiped off at the point of collection of the fly tip.
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you. A while back, I don't know exactly who wants to answer this question, but a while back in scrutiny, we did talk about, and it was mentioned earlier this evening, about integration of systems, CRM systems between the council and Veolia. I was wondering, and we've heard about, Veolia staff talking to council staff, and that seems to pick up patterns some of the time, but it seems that if the CRM systems, the IT systems were integrated more, and I've said this question before in scrutiny before, what are the improvements, where are they going to come, and what do you envisage as the perfect system for integration with the council's IT systems?
Start with that, because I think we're pretty much there in terms of the integration of CRM to ECHO. And that means, for example, take mist bins, that Veolia, at Veolia's end, their crew swipe off whether the bin was presented properly and whether it was collected, and record if that wasn't the case. The resident can report a missed bin on the system, which then goes directly to ECHO, and they have the required period in order to rectify that if it was a missed bin, and that then automatically records the percentage performance and automatically calculates the deduction if any is applicable. That applies now to all those systems which are based upon staff who are recording it on site and feeding it back into ECHO and back into CRM. Where it requires some inspection for the performance to be calculated is where an authorised officer has to inspect. That's streets below grade. So that's where an NCO goes out, reports and records whether the street is below grade or not, puts that through the system, through CRM into ECHO. Veolia then have the required 48 hours to bring it back up to standard, or a shorter period if it's in the town centre, and then they're required to swipe it as completed or not. At that point, the authorised officer re-inspects hour 49 in order to verify that that's been done, and if it hasn't, then that is a performance default and calculates the deduction. So in terms of integration, we're pretty much as far as we can be, but I know that one or two of the less public-facing SPIs are still having work done on them in the back office. I don't know whether Charlie or Anita could just say a bit more about that if you're looking for that sort of information.
Sorry. Yeah, so just following on from what Chris has said, there are a number of SPIs that aren't directly related to the frontline services. So as an example, there's SPIs around vehicle maintenance and MOT failures. So although they're equally as important, particularly on a health and safety perspective, the volume, the numerator in terms of those deductions or those performance measures are much easier to be done manually. So at the moment we're focused on integration on the high volume activity areas such as street cleansing, missed bins, etc. So that's where our focus has been over the last 18 months. But there are a number of SPIs that aren't forward facing that still need additional work in terms of a fully integrated system.
Henry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also for your report, and thanks for some of the good work that you're doing. And we do appreciate that, you know, it's a lot you have to do. However, last meeting we had, we spoke about the green bags that have been left when the sweepers are finished, and we were promised that they should be collected after every, no matter if within a day. This has not been done, and because of that, I noticed. Or we notice there's lots of fly tipping, because whilst the bags are there, people just come and dump on top of them, and that causes a lot of problems also. So I'm just wondering, you know, what you're planning to do about that to make sure the movement go a bit faster. Thank you.
I do actually agree with you that if green bags or any type of bag is left on the street for too long, it does attract other fly tipping. So I acknowledge that point. If I could perhaps see you afterwards and we could talk about the actual streets where you're saying where there's issue around green bags, we do produce a significant. Unfortunately, it's a situation where it's job half done, where we've done a good job with the sweeper, we've emptied the litter bins, and we've swept up all the waste and litter and detritus. And then the cage crew hasn't quite been scheduled accurately enough to ensure that they're picking up that material. What we have been doing is asking our managers to go actually do ride-alongs to ensure that we're focusing. We get the information about when things are reported, green bags are being left. That does come through to us. We do also, not that I like to mention it, regularly review social media. And we learn from that as well about where sweepers may accidentally be putting bags in the wrong place, or they haven't notified their cage crew, their mobile response team, to say, I've left bags on this street, I've left bags on this street. We did also design new pickup points, because we did find some sweepers thought it was acceptable to just do it every 20 yards and drop a bag. Well, that's completely non-acceptable, so we designated clear points. So we've got a number of things. I don't think one thing will fix everything. I think it will be some time to keep refining our schedules and working with our cage crews to ensure that they pick up all the green bags, and we are endeavouring to do that as quickly as possible.
Oh, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I must say that in my ward, since the introduction of the bins, the streets are a lot cleaner. But, thanks, I'm glad you want about. But what happens is that there's a lot of things happening. There's a couple of spots where rubbish are being left. And although it's being reported time and time and time again, it still develops and not cleared. We've got a couple of spots in my ward which we referred to and been noted. And the other thing is that you wouldn't understand how stressful it is for us when our residents complain to us that something is wrong or not happening, and we pass it on to the cabinet member, who then deals with it, and it's go to Veolia, and nothing more is heard of it. And we have got to face those residents day after day, and we got to look in their face and say, well, we haven't heard anything, we don't know. There's one chap who consulted me, and he said he applied for a large bin, one of the large bins, because he's got a family of 6 living in the house. I said to him, well, we'll get onto it. I got onto the cabinet member about it, and nothing happened. There were two people who complained about it. One was only wanted the ordinary bins, and this one wanted the large bins. I must agree that within 4 days, the smaller bins were delivered, but the large bins, nothing happened. And I thought he had received it, because about 5 months when he said he applied for it, nothing happened. And I saw him the other day. I said, oh, good, you received your... He said, no, I haven't had them. I've heard nothing. So, you know, there's a constant non-connection with Veolia when you do contact them about selling. So I would like that to improve anyway.
Thank you for the first part, and I do feel there is an improvement. But what it is highlighting the areas where people aren't following the system, and that's something we need to address. As I said earlier, with working with the new street inspectors, we've got some ideas for enforcement, and we're proposing some of those to assist as much as we can with trying to just encourage these people. A lot of these people actually think they're doing the right thing. They think they're presenting a bag in the particular. There's a spot that's only a few hundred metres from this site in Cllr Road. Bags are presented there every single morning, twice, sometimes 2-3 times a day, because someone thinks they're doing the right thing, because they're putting it by a litter bin. They're not. They're actually breaking the law, and that's what needs to be addressed. As far as the larger bins, the bit we did focus, and it was my decision. I apologise for it. I apologise again. We focused on actually ensuring everyone had a container to start with before we went through the swap process. There hasn't been as many swaps. If I could take the address, we are still working through some auditing of particular sites. We did give a lot of information to extra crews. We are actually going back and auditing around about 2,900 jobs ourselves to ensure that the right standard of work has been achieved and the right bins have been swapped over. But if I could take that one, I can have that double checked and ensured that's on the list, and I can pretty much assure you that will be there tomorrow. But thank you for your comments around the street scene and the impact of the bin rollout.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. I think we thought that we would look first at process, then at fly tipping, and then at street cleaning. And I think it's fair to say we might have moved on to fly tipping, possibly. And I just wondered if I don't know whether this is a question for the cabinet member or for Scott from Veolia. How, in terms of the collection of fly tips, how does that interact with the gathering of evidence for prosecution? As I understand it, Merton's officers gather evidence and Veolia collect, and obviously there's a 24-hour window to collect, which doesn't give Merton's officers very much time to get there. Or in fact, do they even know about the fly tips to get there to collect the evidence? And so I wondered if someone could talk me through how that works, if that's okay.
It does, that's one of the issues that we've been trying to address, and actually one of the ideas we've come up to support the enforcement teams is we've already got an obligation to, if it's obvious, and we have to be careful. Councillor generously puts his hand in the bag, and that is a role that there'll be many people that wouldn't want to undertake. Some of our staff will actually empty bags, they will look through bags, particularly when they know it's a repeat offender. I've got some also some environmental managers and my own street inspector who are prolific at going through to try and address, but people are quite canny and they will try and hide as much information as possible because they realise that people like us are looking. But we do think there's an opportunity to work. We don't just want to solve, we need to design these problems out and ensure that moving forward that no one ever has to go through this again. This is a big structural change. So we want to work with the local authority to collect some of these and bring them back to a designated spot. We mark them up with it's something we're proposing, we're not quite there in the final parts of it yet, where we actually mark up where we've taken that bag from, what time we took it from, a little photograph, and then bring that back to a designated area, one of the transfer stations that's fully permitted for transfer of waste, and then someone can work in an area where it's nice and safe and you can bring back, rather than enforcement walking along Merton High Street, they'd be very busy on Merton High Street or Hayden's Road, but we can then pick up large quantities and come back and give that. So we've got some ideas around that, and also about some areas we've done in some of our other boroughs, where we've come up with in Westminster, we've done all sorts of projects with them, where we know there isn't unlimited funding, so we need to work together to try and say, let's focus on one area, get that area compliant, and then move on to the next area. So focusing it by a small chunk. But We've also got all the information. One thing that Echo has been doing for the last 2 years is capturing all of that information. And we can really get quite some really smart heat maps about where enforcement needs to go, and that work is already being undertaken. So I think that it's positive. We've dealt with the job is not over, as Chris mentioned earlier, but we've certainly dealt with the bulk of the work with delivering the bins, starting the new service, and now we really need to focus on that enforcement. So, I think is an education thing. I think more people, when they realise that what their right collection day is and they're not allowed to do that, I think a lot of people will comply naturally, as we've already seen for a huge part of the population in Merton.
Holden?
Yes, just to add to that, I mean, I'm pleased to hear how Scott's talked about how they pick up on the ones where they're detecting it, but we also do have our officers who go out and when they see fly tips outside houses, or this was what I was referring to earlier, or bags abandoned, they do go through them, and where they find addresses, the householder is written to saying, can you explain how your rubbish ended up here? And there are successful prosecutions. We also have some camera work going on in places, and that's how we've ended up with what was the recycling site on Figs Marsh, and there were 19 cases that were taken forward as a result of the camera surveillance there. We can't have cameras everywhere, but I do think that, and I'm open to suggestions, and this is why I've established some workshops with ward councillors. The next one is next Wednesday, to just look at their patch and just say, how's it going for your area? What are the hot spots for fly tipping? What can we do together to deal with that? And I think it's a mixture of things. It's going to be street champions, it's going to be education, it's going to be reviewing the service for that area, and maybe in some cases deciding whether a recycling site, because that's one of the issues that I've been taking. I've found bank statements blowing around. I've seen Amazon delivery boxes dumped at recycle stations where I've taken pictures of the addresses just to try and follow it through. I don't think that's a sticking plaster. What we need to do is get to the point where we don't have to do that, have to do the prosecutions.
Councillor Holden.
Similar question on fly tipping. This is more about bulky waste collection. The council started charging for bulky waste or special collections, but how do you expect people to manage to drive to Garth Road to the tip when most people are discouraged from driving these days, in Wimbledon especially, with the council's own policies? So how do you expect people to actually do the right thing? And surely this would cause a rise in fly tipping, so possibly a review of that policy change may be required.
I would say, from conversations with other boroughs and other authorities where they have or don't have a charge for bulky waste, it doesn't seem to have an impact on the amount of fly tipping going on in the area. Recently, I've heard of people who've looked to clear some furniture because of clearing out a property, and even if you go to one of the well-known charities that collects, they were charging £400 to collect a dining table, chairs, a bed and a washing machine. So if you're looking, there are other options for disposing of waste, and there are some charities that will take it for free even. But actually, we're not anticipating. We will monitor the level of fly tipping, but we're not anticipating a change because it doesn't seem to have a big impact. When it was made free, some years ago, went from the £10 charge, it didn't have a reduction in the amount of fly tipping that was anticipated perhaps by some. So it doesn't seem to correlate in the way, but that's not to say we won't keep a watch on it. But some of the other options are much more expensive than what Merton is charging.
Questions, and then we'll move on. Do you have any more questions?
Yes. So more of a question on process. One of the problems we've had is the public have got sick and tired of trying to phone through on the call centre or try to log it on the website. So lots of people resorted to Twitter, and Twitter in particular. Is Twitter the now preferred mechanism for Veolia to respond to these queries? Because I tend to find we get better responses when we do.
I've seen that you've been noticeably absent for a while, so no, it's not our preferred option. In fact, I've blocked a number of people, some of the people in this room, because of their rather appalling behaviour. My staff are not there to be abused. We will not accept it. We do listen to anyone that reports a sensible query that isn't politically motivated. We will listen, we will come, we will visit, as people have seen, and I've solved many issues by dealing with that, but we would like all the information to come through the system. Therefore, it can be tracked, it can be logged, and we can learn from it. That's not the most important, but we would not like anything to come through Twitter, ideally.
A question, and that's about the street verges on the pavement and the street cleaning. Whose responsibility is it? Is it Veolia's or ID Verdi's? Because I think there's certain areas in the borough where they have street verges on the pavement, and there's a conflict as to who should be cleaning those.
So there's a split responsibility, really. ID Verdi are responsible for clearing the litter before they cut. Veolia are responsible for litter picking, but the distance of their litter picking is a matter of dispute at the moment, so we're just working that through with Veolia and cleaning those areas up on a regular basis whilst we resolve that discrepancy in that area of dispute.
Yeah, Councillor Fagg.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've moved on to street cleaning. One of the issues that many residents complain about is the reporting of litter on their streets and what happens next. And I wondered if you could talk me through the process of what happens from the moment the resident gets their reference number. So they've reported it online. What a street that needs sweeping. What happens next?
As a resident reports it, it does come directly to our ecosystem. We currently treat those, it's classified as a street below grade. So it requires somebody to go and visit to discuss. We do receive, during autumn, surprisingly, a huge number of calls about leafing. So with those particularly, we look to send someone and assess, do we need to put them up the plan or below the plan? Also, some people find that an individual dog fouling incident doesn't require us to send a vehicle back that does around 14 miles to the gallon and with 2 people. So we do send out a manager to go and inspect. Sometimes there is a little bit of a time lag on that. It is something I've been in discussions with all of the boroughs involved in the South London Waste Partnership about improving as part of our response times on those. I do think that the public, irrespective of whether it's classified as a street below grade, do feel there's an issue. So we do feel that we should be sending a speedier response, and it's something I've been working with these gentlemen on to try and resolve, because I do think that is something that comes up. There is always the issue that someone's just going to report a crisp packet that's just blowing down the street. But if I'm looking at trying to reclassify some of those items and look at, rather than just having a broad brush street below grade, actually could it be a litter issue, a detritus issue, an abandoned waste issue, which would need an immediate response? Or perhaps would it be, if it's a weeding or a leafing issue, it's not necessarily life critical, so we'd be push that back for 5 days and then have a purge in that area. So those are the kind of things that we're currently discussing in the contract, and looking at improving upon the offers that we're currently making.
So it is the case that a manager first assesses the road before a cleaning crew is sent out. And how does that work with sort of very long roads? There are lots of incredibly long roads.
The manager is mobile and is in a vehicle, so they will drive the length of that street, it's actually someone that we inherited from one of the other local authorities, who we brought back in. He was a street cleansing expert, so we brought back in to make the clear assessment. I think, some of the figures were quite shocking about actually how many people that were reporting something that was below a grade B, or a street requires attention, or a street below grade, and it actually was just a couple of minor pieces of litter which were dealt with by the manager on site. So we need to work on that response and clarifying that. So it is a manager that goes out and checks on that before we deploy resources.
Yeah, I have a question on the rollout process. At this meeting last year, I said to you that there is an increasingly large number of blocks of flats in the borough. All have varying sorts and arrangements for their bins, and I suggested you may want to get a good grip on that before the rollout. Suffice to say that did not happen, and so my question is, why did you not seek advice from ward councillors? And when can we expect all the bin arrangements for the various types of flats to be finally resolved?
Would you mind defining what you mean by a flat? Property of more than 6 properties, properties greater than 6 properties?
Last year there was no definition set at the time for that, so this was blocks of flats. Some of them only have, let's say, 7 or 8, some are 12 or 14. Lots of our wards have blocks of flats of varying sizes, but most of these have had weekly arrangements. We're told they're going to have weekly arrangements, and then Veolia or the council have given them lots of mixed messaging since.
Just to clarify, we've not actually changed any of the what we would call a communal property. There has been no change to the communal schedules. We have moved some of them that were actually currently on the afternoon collection. We brought them into the days because we were suffering more issues. We've had less issues with parked cars by having the services work in the morning. So we haven't made any fundamental changes to that service. That was never part of the mobilisation. It was a curbside and bag rollout. So that's the definition. So we are working currently on houses of multiple occupancy where we've got up to 6 people, and I was really interested to learn from one of the councillors that there was actually one house of multiple occupancy that had actually 90 people in there that was expected to all use one small container. Clearly that's not acceptable, so we've worked and found a resolution to that. But the communal properties have remained on weekly collections, some of them more frequently than weekly collections as need requires. But there isn't really a huge plan to change all of the current communal property collections.
Thank you very much, Veolia and all the officers for coming and speaking tonight and answering. I think we'll now move on. And can I before we close, make a recommendation that you come back in 6 months to review the performance? So thank you. Move on to agenda item 5. And I think it's Chris Lee, will you introduce the
Happy to, Chair. Just to say a few words, and Ben and Kath are here along with Jason to answer any questions, but I'm hoping this is relatively straightforward in that 2 years ago the council agreed to introduce a levy for diesel vehicles in controlled parking zones and asked that when we did that we reviewed it after 2 years of its operation. That anniversary is coming up on the 31st of March. Scrutiny asked that they consider the terms of reference for that review, so we're bringing those in front of Scrutiny this evening for your consideration. Goes next to Cabinet. As you can see from the papers, particularly paragraphs 2.1.1, 2.1.4 and 2.2.1, we're looking at the impact of the diesel levy. We're proposing to look at whether that should then be applied to pay and display vehicles if it's proved to be successful, and also looking at the benefits or disbenefits of emissions-based charging, with the intention of bringing this back later in the year. As I say, colleagues are here from various parts of the department to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor.
Yes, thank you for this. I do recall being told that we would expect to get some figures about the reduction in the number of diesels in these parking zones and whether or not that represents a success or not. It was asked at full council, it's been asked by us multiple times. How come after 2 years of this scheme do we have no figures presented whether or not, as to whether or not this is actually working? Because unless I see evidence, I'll be very reluctant to recommend more changes to any parking schemes.
So to be clear, this isn't the evidence. This is the paper that triggers the evidence gathering. and any evidence that we were to present up to this point in time would only be partial, because members asked that we look at this after 2 years of its operation. And we need to compare apples with apples, so looking at full years and whether there is any change in diesel ownership. And you only get that on the anniversary of residents repurchasing or not repurchasing their diesel vehicle permit.
Because Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you. So just a side note, actually, before we go into the terms of reference, we talked about emission-based charging here. And it sounds like you do intend to look at it in the future. What other areas of evidence, other than the diesel levy review here, are you looking at in terms of supporting possibly bringing that in?
So we would look at what other authorities have done and what impact that's had. There's a reasonable body of evidence from other authorities in London and elsewhere about emissions-based charging, and the technology now that we're seeking to introduce with the new IT system would allow us to have that sort of stratification. So we would do desktop research and discuss it with other boroughs as to what the efficacy and the benefit of that is.
Anyone else for questions? Oh, Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if we could make, I think what is quite important is the aim of each of the different policies and what behaviour it's intended to drive. So the diesel levy is intended to reduce the number of people using diesel vehicles. The emissions-based schemes, I would suspect, are intended to do something slightly different, which is to change the profile of vehicles that people purchase. And I wondered if there was any awareness of any evidence on how schemes in other boroughs, how the behaviour of people had changed in those two different ways.
You're absolutely right that what we're looking for as a policy objective is fewer cars and fewer polluting cars, and for people to make those choices. You're right in saying that the objective of the diesel levy review will be looking at whether our policy has had any impact on the levels of diesel car ownership in comparison with the national change, because we expect there will be a national change, and it's whether there's been any differential there. 2 years is quite a short period of time, and I suspect people's behavioural change is based upon, at least in part, the amount they've invested in that vehicle and how close they are to a decision point about reinvesting or not reinvesting. There's also a number of other moving parts in this equation around crossovers, where people wouldn't need to buy a permit, and the expansion of CPZs generally. But I'm happy to explore beyond the specific pursuit of diesel vehicle permits and the changes there and the benefits or disbenefits of emissions-based charging, explore the wider point, which I think you're pursuing, about what is it that changes behaviour, what nudges create those changes in purchasing or non-purchasing habits that can have that beneficial impact on the borough's environment. And within reason and within the scope of this review, we can look at that to see whether there is evidence emerging from elsewhere. This is a fairly nascent field, as you can see from the discussions we've had recently and in the paper. So it's not as though we're awash with evidence. Indeed, we're starting to develop our own evidence through the proposed parking charges that are in front of the public at the moment. So I suppose I'm seeking to limit expectations, really, in what might come back from that review, because I wouldn't want it to be seen that looking at these two areas specifically will provide us with a wealth of evidence about the economic drivers and the psychological drivers in purchasers' minds and motorists' minds at any given point in time, so that we can tweak this with a scalpel. We don't have that scalpel, and we're right at the sort of forefront of some of these policy changes and their implementation.
Thank you. In the report, it goes into some detail about cashless parking. This can be an issue that stirs up some people, in particular certain elderly groups who still prefer to put cash in the meter. How will you sort of get the message across and encourage behaviour change that they will go along with? Because sometimes some elderly people are more hesitant. And secondly, if you for the meters you do keep, will you consider allowing card payments at them in a sort of TfL bus or tram pay-as-you-go type option? Because most people have credit cards or smartphones, but they don't have cash. So could the meters that remain have something like that on them?
Thank you. The technology is changing rapidly. So the terminals on street, we're looking at what the offer is, whether that can be card payments, whether that can cope with emissions of the vehicle. If you put your vehicle registration in, it knows what vehicle it is as well. But we are conscious also that members of the public, not necessarily elderly people, will prefer cash. So there will always be an offer, whether it's purchasing through the council, through local shops, or keeping a certain number of machines on street in the vicinity, particularly in the high usage areas. So they're all the things that we will be looking at as part of the review. But we will bear in mind those people that do not want to use cashless, because there will always be those, and we need to be aware of that and be minded. And we'll look at that in this review.
A question? Okay.
Not a question, Chair, but if we've moved beyond questions, I'd like to propose a recommendation.
Anyone else have any questions? No? Okay. Councillor Fairclough, do you have a recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose along the lines that of the question that I asked. I've got a draft recommendation written out, and I've discussed, as you're aware, Chair, with the Cabinet member who I believe has discussed with officers. And that's that this panel recommend to request that the Cabinet amend or clarify the terms of reference to include an examination of any evidence on broader questions of how behaviour is being influenced by these types of policies. For example, with regards to the diesel levy, as to whether people have replaced diesel cars with petrol cars or whether overall car use has been reduced. And with regards to emissions-based charging, as to whether people have switched to less polluting vehicles or whether overall car use has been reduced. This panel believes that this may assist in the development of successfully aligned air quality policies, but is aware of the wider policy context and the potentially different objectives of these and aligned policies. Quite a mouthful, I apologise.
Does anyone have any comment on the recommendation that has just been proposed? Okay, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you, and I did read it before. So, but yeah, and the discussion you've had with Chris here as well, I do think it complements it. So I would be supportive myself, and that's my comment that I'd make.
Chris, do you have anything to respond to that, or do you?
I saw the suggestion earlier.
Yeah, you're fine. On to item number 6, Air Quality Task Group Action Plan. And again, it's Chris Lee to introduce that, I think.
Say very little, Chair. I think the report speaks for itself. I think there's been excellent progress in terms of delivery of the recommendations, but Jason and other colleagues from Environmental Health are here to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on air quality? Okay, Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, me again. At the last full council, which the topic was on air quality, the majority group amended a motion on emissions-based charging, as it happens, to refer to an ultra-low emission zone, a mini ultra-low emission zone in Merton being introduced in April. I can't see any reference to this in the report. I wondered if you could give me any more detail on that.
We have committed ourselves, sorry, Jason Andrews from the pollution team, we have committed ourselves to review the possibility of the use of clean air zones, which is basically the same type of thing. It's quite a large piece of work. We need to do the scoping report first. But I think the plan does actually say that we are committed to looking at that from April 2019.
Okay, Councillor Holden.
Thank you. So one of the key recommendations from the Air Quality Task Group last year was appointment of an extra air quality officer. So can you let me know if that person's been appointed and what tasks they've been set so far to help improve air quality in the borough?
Thank you, Councillor. I can confirm that the person sitting next to me is our new Principal Air Quality Officer. She has been tasked to deliver the Air Quality Action Plan within Merton. It's important to say that our service now covers 3 major London boroughs as part of the Regulatory Services Partnership. And with that, we are bringing together lots of other experts in the area of air quality, and we will have a team going from April of about 16 people, which is heavily supplemented by external grant funding. So I think you'll see quite a dramatic change in the way that we tackle this problem, and it will ramp up as from April.
Councillor Macon, do you have anything to say?
This report seems to be all good news. Would officers consider hosting an APSI seminar in the borough to spread the good practice amongst other APSI members who are basically local authorities within the country?
Yeah, perhaps I can answer that. We share expertise through a number of groups within the air quality industry. We form a part of central London groups in the GLA, and we also have local cluster groups. So some of the work that we're leading on in Merton is actually being shared throughout regionally, and we're trying to get some of that nationally through organisations such as DEFRA.
Holden.
Thank you. When I looked through the reports and seen most of the indicators were green in progress, which is good. There was one red one I noticed about establishing an air quality group for the borough. What would that look like? Who will be involved, and when will we expect to see that? Because it has been raised at full council before of having such a body. So yeah, I would like some details on that, please.
We're proposing to use the environmental forum as a start or the basis of the group. There was a meeting convened in January, but unfortunately I was on sick leave at the time, and we'll be picking it up at the next meeting. And that group will basically pull together representatives of the local community, because we have lots of people interested in air quality, council officers and senior council officers, and hopefully councillors as well, to actually try and steer the issue of air quality in the borough. And it's a practice that we're seeing in Wandsworth and in Richmond as well. So it's we have lots of people that are interested and want to play a part, so why not get them together around the table?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a welcome response. There have been some groups in the borough who've been very keen to do some citizen science on this and help us with their own sort of scientific data and recording of pollution. People like Wimbledon East Hillside Residents, Hayden's Road North, Sustainable Merton and Clean Air Merton, etc. Wimbledon Society. Would you welcome the use of the citizen science and liaise with them, with councillors as well, because together we all want to help improve air quality?
Indeed, we do support that. We pay for various monitoring techniques within the borough. We loan equipment to people. We need to ensure that that equipment is used properly and that the evidence is gathered in accordance with our guidance. So yeah, I think in generally we do. We'd like to start pulling that evidence together and start using it in some of our official reports. We do have to be a little bit circumspect, because there are groups that will focus on particular issues when we obviously have to see the wider picture. So we have to take that with a degree of trepidation. But yeah, in general, we do support people, and Maya here has been working with various groups throughout the borough to give them training on how to use air quality monitoring equipment.
Clough.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask very quickly two sort of connected questions about things slightly outside air quality, but with impact on air quality. The first was Heathrow expansion. In para 10.5 of the report, it noted that we will engage fully in the consultation process. So I wondered if Merton will submit a consultation response on Heathrow. The 3 consultations currently ongoing. And the second one was linked the air quality impact of 20 mile an hour zones. I know that's not fully, it's not fully an air quality issue, but I wondered if you could outline any work being done on the air quality impacts of 20 mile an hour zones. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pick both of those up. So we will submit a response on Heathrow. What that is yet to be decided. We're not gathering any specific evidence on the air quality impact of 20 mile an hour zones. My guess is that if there are deflections, humps, and chicanes where you are slowing vehicles down intermittently, I suspect that's not entirely beneficial because of the slowing down and the revving up. But if it is a 20 mile an hour zone without those sorts of interruptions and vehicles are complying with it and not speeding up and slowing down, then that shouldn't have a detrimental impact on air quality compared to any other zone. But to answer your question fully, we're not capturing that evidence separately.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you. Question on anti-idling. Recently, as part of the task group last year, we recommended anti-idling zones, and I'm glad to see that was implemented as part of that review. What's the status of implementing and putting up the signs and doing a comms campaign to help spread the word and possibly even start an enforcement?
With regards to anti-idling, we've started the rollout of the signs throughout the borough. There's a lot more to do. We've had requests from a number of other areas to have signs installed, so we're going to get some of those made up. We're subscribed to a London-wide project on anti-idling for this year, so hopefully our bid will be successful, which will then means we are committed to enforcing by the end of the year. We'll also, I think, have about 8 events a year for the next 3 years. So we're almost being pushed into that, but it's early days, and I need to have discussions with colleagues about where some of that enforcement sits. But over the next few years, we are committed to it, yeah.
Any more questions? I was just wondering, before we go on, if everyone would like an update in a year's time to see how the air quality task group is working. Does
I'd
everybody
say so, yes,
yeah.
please.
Okay, could we have it back in a year's time? Thank you. Thank you. And on to the next item on the agenda is the electric vehicle infrastructure. Is that Paul McGarry?
Thank you, Chair. This report is to update the panel on the activities the Council is undertaking to promote the rollout and greater usage of electric vehicles for business and residents. That was part of the Air Quality Task Group actions, and we're rolling a lot of this out through the funding we've got from TfL now and in the next 3 years. We're currently finalising the 3rd version of the local implementation plan, and that's how we will deliver the Mayor's transport strategy locally within Merton. And also taking on board the Mayor's Healthy Streets policies, which is about rebalancing streets and the environment to improve streets for promoting walking and cycling and healthier outcomes, including more public space. The demand for electric vehicles is growing, and with that the range of technology for supporting charging is varied, so there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So Merton takes a very pragmatic approach to testing different charging technologies at the moment. Where we're at as of today, we've got 70 publicly available charging points across the borough. That they will typically charge a vehicle within 3 to 4 hours, and they're run by Source London. We are rolling out another 31 next month, so we're going to be about 101 charging points by April. Parallel to that, Transport for London are also installing a network of 20 rapid charging points. We have got one outside the building here, one going into Cllr shortly, and another 20 to be rolled out next year, so that's going to take us to our 2020 target early. So we're ahead of our target for electric vehicle rollouts for charging. The rapid chargers are more aimed at taxis because they can be charged in 20 minutes. So the taxi fleet and the Uber fleet will be able to use some of them. In terms of on-street bays, we get a lot of inquiries from residents wanting to charge on the street, which means putting cables from the house across the pavement. Currently that is an issue for us as a highway authority because it's a trip hazard, and then you get into issues of who's to blame if someone's hurt. We are working with London councils and TfL to see if a London-wide policy on that specific issue can be brought forward. Something that will help with that, and it's something we're beginning to roll out shortly, is lamp column charging. So that does deal with on-streets where you can run a cable from the lamp column to the car. There's been a rollout in neighbouring boroughs. We are currently looking at that at the moment because it requires different electricity feeding and meterage from the lights and the charging. What we're also doing in terms of taking up electric vehicles and to reduce private vehicles is we're rolling out increased use of car clubs. A lot of that comes through the planning system where more and more developments are providing bays for car clubs. We've got 3 active car club providers in Merton. First one's Blue City, so they have all electric vehicles, so people can rent them and charge them across the borough. Enterprise run a car club for on-street bays with about 200 residents in Merton signed up to that, but the largest one by far is Zipcar. And Zipcar Flex, we've got over 5,000 Merton members, so they anticipate to increase going forwards. Our local target is to double that target in Merton, so we have about 10,000 car club members. And again, a lot of that will come through the planning system with more car-free households. I think I'll leave that there and take questions from the panel. Yeah.
Has anybody got questions? Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's quite exciting stuff. And perhaps I live in a ward that's a bit more forward-thinking. I'll get more requests than I think about when lamppost charging, especially, is coming through. So, sorry, could you just clarify what the barriers are to implementing those? But also, if they were to be easily implemented, a few of my residents would like to see maybe on a street basis, if there was enough demand, that would then drive where you did put those lampposts. And I'm also interested to see what strategies you use widely of where you'd put those lampposts as well.
So in terms of lamppost charging, the barriers tend to be replacing the whole lamp column, then requiring 2 additional electricity feeds, one for the council lights, which we pay the bill for, and then one for the electric vehicle charging, question mark about who pays the energy for that. So we have to actually tie up with a provider who can provide that infrastructure and work with us. It is beginning to happen in neighbouring boroughs, so we're monitoring how they work and how they roll out. What would be very helpful if you're getting inquiries from your wards about people wanting these, it's good for us to know what streets want it, and then we can plan any rollout with that. That's certainly what we're doing with the inquiries we receive. Sorry, the other thing as well is the on-street bays. It will require an on-street bay being lost if it's in a CPZ, or if it's in an area where parking is under pressure. It would be helpful to the residents supporting the introduction of that bay.
All right, Councillor Holden.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of these lamp column charging, it was first mooted to Councillor Dean about 4 or 5 years ago, and to me about 3 years ago, and it was insinuated that council was already trialling this. So I was just wondering what happened to that trial, and did it ever happen, and was there any results for it?
I'm not aware of a specific trial 3 years ago. I know there was ideas of solar lamp columns at that time, but not to charge electric vehicles. So what we're working through now is with Source London and TfL about the rollout that's happening in Lambeth.
Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask about the siting of the Source London charges that we currently have and how that's been decided. 3 to 4 hours for a full charge seems sort of quite an awkward time. It's not long enough probably for most shoppers, but it's sort of more maybe geared towards residential sort of overnight charging. And I just wondered how you decided where to put those.
So the Source London rollout has been done for a couple of reasons. There are some quite high-profile locations. That's so that electric vehicle charging is in people's minds. People see it and they get used to seeing that infrastructure on the streets. It's also tied to, we have the data from DVLA about where the highest concentration of electric vehicles registered in Merton are. That does tend to be the west of the borough at the moment. So the first wave of rollout went there because that's where the demand is. So you're seeing that around Wimbledon Rains Park. The next wave of rollouts of the Source London begins to fill the gaps between the east and west of the borough. But initially, to create the market, they went to where the electric vehicles were registered to.
Councillor Holden.
Thank you. Last week I received an email from a group doing e-bike shares. Now, I've not really responded or looked into it yet, but this seems to be a common thing to help with modal shift, is people find cycling can be challenging and difficult, but if you stick a small electric battery on, it can assist going up hills or longer journeys. So what is the view of the council of adopting a bike share scheme that involves e-bikes?
Yeah, so probably as part of our report is going to come next, Scrutiny. As part of the local implementation plan, we are looking to partner up with dockless bike hire to promote bike hire in the borough. Other boroughs have seen an influx of a number of providers, and actually we're working with TfL to get a code of practice with those companies so they don't flood the borough with multiple, but we actually begin to choose one. So that is in draft at the moment. We are also looking at partnering up with an electric bike hire company. Don't know when the rollout of that will be, but yeah, there's a few hilly bits of the borough where that would be quite advantageous. Yeah.
And I'd just like to ask, when you have these charging points, is there a limit as to how long they can be there to charge their cars, or can they stay there overnight having their cars charged? But will that impact on other users wanting to use it, and how does the charging mechanism work?
It's a question I'd probably take back to Blue Point and Source London. Generally, a lot of residents will park overnight, so the charge of 4 hours will work. During the day might be quicker. I understand the charging is done with a smart card, so if it looks like there's been a car there for days, Source London would notice that and seek to move it on. That's certainly what happens with the Blue Point, sorry, the Blue City, the rental cars. The company do move them around. If a private resident was there charging for ages, I'd have to check with Source London about what they do in that situation.
Holden?
Yes, thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. One of the things we've noticed in Wimbledon is businesses in particular have learned to trick with electric vehicles. They manage to acquire one and then park it in electric vehicle bays all day and not charging, just leaving it there, and becomes almost a private bay for them. So it was spoken about in this committee before about this flaw in the system. So I would like to suggest that the policy be reviewed such that in key business locations or in the town, or in fact across the whole piece, a limit of 2 hours during the day, which unplugged in, because that's what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about them charging up, and then they can move their car to another normal bay, and then this helps facilitate more electric vehicles to charge. So my recommendation is to this panel to recommend to Cabinet to review this policy. I hope that's something you'd be minded to consider.
Yeah, let's certainly look into that and see if we can enforce if a vehicle isn't actually charging at a charge point. Yeah.
Councillor Henry?
Thank you for that. Just wondering how you had educated our public residents where and how the charging bay will be where it will be located. The reason being, we have quite a few residents who complain about the areas where the parking bays are, and because they didn't have any information about it. So I just wonder how you had informed them that they will be there.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add, is a complaint that people want the charger in their street, or they don't? They don't want it. Yeah, so it's similar to the previous question. The rollout is currently based on where we know from DVLA information where electric vehicles are currently located in the borough, and also tying that up with Source London, who are the provider, about where they think the chargers will get most usage. And then what is now beginning to emerge is actually residents who are saying they want it in their street. We're beginning to build up a database of that. It's going to be it's a growing industry. The amount of electric vehicles is increasing year on year, so it's going to become more prevalent across the borough.
Okay, Councillor Holden.
Okay, one final one from me. These electric vehicle charging points are very modern and bright lights and look a bit garish. And I've had comments and complaints from people in places such as conservation areas in Wimbledon and also Mitcham Cricket Green conservation area, saying that these things are a bit of a light pollution and a blot in a nice area. Is there any mechanism to take back to Source London to suggest slightly modified charge points that look less bold in certain conservation areas?
We have asked that of Source London, at least if they could dim the green lights on it. Apparently not. The infrastructure tends to be what it is, because it's got a whole lot of stuff inside it for transformers and electricity gubbins. I'm not an expert on that. They tend to be the standard rollout for the moment, so there isn't any option to change it for conservation areas at this stage.
I think we'll move on now to the next. I think if we haven't got any more questions. So, okay, the next one is performance indicators. I'll ask Councillor McLean to identify areas he sees.
Thank you,
like
Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair. It's not actually in your pack. There was a sheet missing, but if we refer to, and I don't have the coding, but after chatting with officers regarding housing and the new Homelessness Act, we have seen an increase in the number of cases being referred to the council. However, those cases have been dealt with quickly, and there has been no negative impact on delivery performance, which is good news. With regard to libraries, we are down on visits at the moment in the trend, but we are still ahead where we were last year. Moving now on to waste street cleaning. We've heard a lot about that tonight, but just to bring attention to some figures, CRP 09, the target is 7,000. Recorded fly tips, we are at 9,800, which is clearly considerably higher than where we want to be. Street cleaning. In November, it was 16.43. Today, this is the number of residents that are satisfied. We are now at 20.92. So we've heard a lot tonight about improvement. The trend is not improving. Indeed, it is getting worse. The target is 8%, so to repeat that, we are actually now 20.92, up from November at 16.43. However, the number of missed collections, that has improved. In November, it was 126 per 100,000. It is now at 95. That said, the target is 50, so we are still well above where we need to be. Thank you.
I think, Chair, we've covered the waste ones earlier in some detail. I'd just point out one or two other areas of good performance for the panel's attention. On regulatory services, the food premises rated 2-star or below, which is significantly better than target, I think gives us a lot of encouragement about the quality of restaurants in the borough because of the work that's being undertaken. Secondly, we managed to get to a score of 5 for the parks quality management system. It's always been nudging 4.8, 4.9, and now it's tripped over to 5 in January. So that gives us some real comfort about the quality of ID Verdi's performance in terms of parks maintenance. And then just lastly, the suite of planning indicators. I suppose it's consolidating now at a really high level. in terms of turnaround of planning applications for all three categories. And we're also now starting to really eat into the backlog of enforcement cases, 384 cleared in January, so some movement there. And lastly, the good performance in property, where both vacancy rates and outstanding debt is much better than target. So notwithstanding some of the areas that are flashing red, just point those out, Chair.
Does anyone have any questions on do? Okay.
Thank you. First one is CRP 044, Park and Services Revenue. I noticed the value to date is 15.6 million, 1.6 million over target. So it's a two-part question. How have you managed to raise so much extra, and where does this put us in rankings in London?
So I don't know the answer to the last question, because that information is only published on an annual basis. The reason that figure is above the target is because of motorists' continued failure to comply with the traffic regulations, particularly around moving traffic offences. So despite the best efforts of Ben and his staff to encourage the right behaviour, people continue to stop in yellow boxes, turn left where they're not allowed to, and drive down in bus lanes. And no, whilst there is some compliance, it's not coming down as quickly as we expected.
Okay, Councillor Holden.
Thank you. I have a question on municipal solid waste, SP 067, page 59. It says here that a value of only 5% of waste was sent to landfill. Where did the rest of the waste go, and did it end up sat with the incinerator in Benetton Lane?
I'll confirm that that's the case, and the 5% is just the bottom ash that can't be re-incinerated or put through for energy production, and that goes to landfill. So we're now in the commissioning phase and very shortly into the full operational phase of the energy from waste plant. I think that's right.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
Any more questions? Can we move on? Okay. We go through the work programme. I don't think there are any changes to make to the work programme. Are you happy with it the way it is?
Is it worth asking Chris to clarify about things being deferred or maybe come later in the year?
Okay. Chris, do you have anything to add to the work programme, or do you think that we need to add anything to it? Is everything as it should be? Okay, fine, thank you.
Do you want to make a mention about the leisure centre opening?
Oh, yes. I just thought I'd remind all councillors and everybody who wants to attend the opening of the leisure centre on the 30th of March at, what is it 4 o'clock? Yeah, so if you could be there, it would be lovely to see you there. The last one is the re-procurement of the Highway Services Maintenance and Works contract. And I propose we just talk to the white paper rather than go through the green paper. Are people happy with that? Yeah. You've got a question on the green paper. Okay. Anybody got... maybe first I should ask Paul McGarry to talk to the white paper.
Thank you, Chair. Shall I just introduce the white paper, then save questions after? Yeah. So this paper follows on from the report to this panel on the 4th of September, which set out the procurement process and the indicative scope of the new highway services contract. We have now started the procurement process, and the indicative contract start date would be the June 9, 2019, and the indicative commencement of works on the 1st of September. Going out to fuel procurement gives the Council the opportunity to tailor the scope of works and spec to the current needs of the service. The revised scope also accounts for integration with the Council's new digital asset management system and will drive further efficiencies with our site inspectors now on site with iPads able to raise jobs on the streets. So it's integration, back office integration with them. At the last panel, we provided a high-level scope of the service. That was presented on the 4th of September. In the intervening period, we have now developed a full service spec. Thank you to anyone who's read through all that. We are now about to launch into the ITT process. We have put the questionnaire out to bidders. We're expecting that back end of this week. We hope to launch the ITT 11th of March and conclude the procurement evaluations by the 3rd of May. So to update the panel, that is where we're at with the procurement process. We can take questions on the spec of the scope afterwards.
Councillor Holden, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Question on the white paper. You've set quite an optimistic timetable. How realistic is this to be implemented in time? Because that's often a key consideration of ours.
We're currently on track in terms of the procurement process. We've employed the project manager who's worked with the team to get the spec and all that up and running, and it's been through the Council's procurement board, so that is on track. The gap between cabinet approval and contract mobilisation, that is currently about 2 months. Now, because a lot of our new systems are in place and up and running, it should be quite easy for a lot of the soft market testing thrown out. A lot of other contractors use the same systems. Would like longer to bed in a new contractor if that's the case, but the 2 months is workable. We have also changed our capital programme to do a lot of the street resurfacing upfront in the summer, which is when we normally do it, to give us time to work with the new contractor if that's the case. Yeah.
Any more questions from anyone? No. Do you want to discuss now the green paper? I'll have to ask the members of the public to leave while we discuss the green paper. I'm sorry.